All right, let's get into this here. Make sure I've got the chat up. All right, so let's get started with the daily market recap. Pretty eventful day overall in the market. I had a pretty large fade. Ended up closing near the lows on the session. So a lot of volatile price action. We go out to the daily. Pretty big sell overall as we just kind of look at where things are situated here. We had earnings after the bell from Apple and Amazon. Amazon's down, Apple up slightly. Pretty modest reaction. Net reacted positively, coin down. So a little bit of a mixed bag. Not as exciting as Microsoft and Meta, but this is a pretty big sell today. Overall, we were talking yesterday about the 63.36 level being a super important spot to hold. So we actually cracked that intraday and then bounced a little bit into the close. So we closed right at it. We've got some the 9 EMA up in here. So going into tomorrow, this was also month end. So tomorrow will be the start of a new month. Often you'll get some end of the month and beginning of the month flows. So we'll see how the market reacts. The way I'm viewing this is this is a very important pivot in the near term, just for this current kind of wave that we're on. If this can manage to defend, there's still a chance that this leg isn't over yet. We could see a push toward 64.50, 6,500. But if not, if we get a negative reaction tomorrow, then I think we're set up for a nice pullback into 62.90, and then possibly 6,200 before finding some more meaningful support. All right, so that's S&P, what we're looking at. Let's get into, there's a couple of trades I wanted to review from today. Um, I'll update this before I send this out later. But yeah, so those are thoughts on S&P. But as far as playbook trades today, a couple that were good to review. So this Fig had an IPO. I missed this, but Space Monkey ended up catching this, so good to see that. Anytime you have a catalyst waiting for some setups intraday to kind of form, can offer some really good opportunities. So this in particular, I thought this entry here off this turn was nice. This is around where Space Monkey started to get involved. So you just have initial kind of reaction to the IPO opening, getting public, and then your first dip usually establishes a trend for the day. And while this is very fresh with minimal price history, this did establish a nice trend for the day. A little bit of consolidation, and then a turn out of that consolidation higher. So that was a nice scalp into the close, if nothing else, as a day trade. Let me go ahead and add this to the database real quick. Let's see, Fig. We don't have volume data on that yet. Too soon. All right, and then we have a Meta. That Meta was quite good today off the open. So Meta, this in particular, this was set up to be a record trade for the account challenge, and just disappointed a bit, but it still was an amazing opening drive trade. So this was very good. Played out exactly as we expected. A good example of where the RSI divergences have been very helpful for timing our opening drive trades. So if we just look at this a little bit closer for review, this obviously had a big beat on earnings, gapping through all-time highs, and then we have this pre-market structure, a bit of a flag of sorts, setting up, and this pre-market pivot around 770 is what we were watching. So you kind of have this area here, 770, 770, 772. This basically, oftentimes what you'll see happen if we pull up the RSI on like the 15, you'll see that most of the time a lot of people will be like, oh, it's too extended to really get any movement, and it didn't really get much follow through the pre-market highs, but oftentimes what you'll get is this kind of reset. So in the pre-market session, this reset really nicely. Go out to the 30-minute. After this big of a move, we saw the RSI get very reset, which can set up a nice opening drive trade. And when that is present, plus some pre-market structure, which developed a little bit later. Earlier in the session, it wasn't that good, but as we got in closer and closer to the open, it did get better. So what the trade was, simply put, with that alignment, was a sweep of this pre-market area and reclaim. So what you can do on setups like this, it just creates these really high risk reward scenarios where your stop is super defined, because if it's going to hold the turn, it's going to get up and go right away. It's not going to, mess around and look back. If this would pull back to that low, the odds of a give and go or a bigger pullback are much higher. So recognizing that moment paired with everything else, lining up with this trade, without getting into a ton of detail, quite simply put, this is your entry on the turn, risking that low. So you're risking 6 points, and your main target is pre-market highs to make 13. So really good risk reward. The premiums were also 1 DTE, which offers nice leverage for options traders at times or with setups like these. These options paid really well. Went from 4 to over 8. And while we didn't end up getting that break and run through the pre-market highs, that would have been a really nice trade, with 800 being a magnet. Just didn't quite get there. I think S&P kind of weighed on this a bit. If the S&P would have held the 6,400 backtest early in the session and turned, I think this could have been, a big op, a top op that we archived to review for, quarters to come. So this was still really good though off the opening drive. It also set up again intraday. So for those that are, looking or to scalp or more interested in scalps, that type of playbook, stock selection is super important on those types of, that style of trading. And this set up a really nice flag intraday. So this is a good example where, a name that is moving really well, you can just kind of wait. And I did try to catch a couple rolls in here on the left side, and it just goes to show you that it's much harder to do on the left side versus if you just wait for this. This is where I ended up catching a nice entry for a roll, break out of that flag. These options paid, the 800 calls paid 100% on just this move right here. So, if you're looking for scalps, say you're not too comfortable or confident with the open, you can just kind of hang out and wait for something like this to set up, and then just make sure expectations are, relative to the move that you're getting, right? You have to take profits into the move, and you can always leave some runners on for that high a day break if it happens, but then just trail from there. And in this case, this did just kind of leak lower into the close. All right, so that was Meta. Let me update this real quick. And, for those that don't know, every day I update the playbook trades that happen throughout the session, regardless if I traded it or not. It doesn't matter. I think this exercise I've been doing for several years, and it just really improves pattern recognition by taking, just a little bit of time every day to go through what worked and also what didn't, but making sure you log what worked. It just really helps with that. So, all right. We also had Microsoft. So Microsoft was an exhaustion gap today. And it's kind of funny because going into the session, when we were talking about in the pre-market, what we were talking about, or what I was talking about, was the exhaustion gap that could set up. We talked about this a couple days ago, where anytime you get a grind like this, it just has pretty much no momentum, and then a huge gap, it often leads to that exhaustion gap. Now, I just haven't traded enough of these to have confidence to put that on, but this played out exactly as expected. I had a bit of hesitation just because earnings were so good, and market had recovered back to 6,400, and things were looking pretty good. So in my mind at the time, it just didn't seem like something to really focus on, but that was clearly wrong, and the first inclination on this was correct. So this is one that I'll archive as a top op. This is not something you see a whole lot with big names like this. This was absolutely textbook for an opening drive. I'm sorry, exhaustion gap off the open. So the way I would trade that is once you get into the open, I would just be looking to risk the pre-market highs or even the opening print. So you could be pretty aggressive, because with the exhaustion gap working well, you would not want to see any kind of uptick off the open. So as you see this, you're probably going to time an entry somewhere in this candle, and then you're just risking the high. So say you get involved in like the middle, you're risking around 5 points or so, and this ends up moving 18 to the downside. And it never really turned the corner. I tried to scalp longs a couple times just off the EMAs that we're testing for the first time, which has been a pretty high probable trade. for me and just couldn't really turn. So that ended up being break even overall. But this exhaustion gap play was really really good. So all right, let's log this. We have about 4 times our vol. All right, STX. This was one that we did talk about. Better for common stock. It's just a very routine technical, or I'm sorry, continuation trade. Really textbook though. So we talked about this last night. I didn't trade this, but just worthy to archive anyways. Just really routine. So day one gap down on earnings on a name that's very strong, and it got bought up very aggressively, closed up in the 20% of its daily range, which is very bullish for continuation. And then today, you're just looking to take the break at the prior day high, minimally targeting that gap fill, but this obviously did much more and actually ended up making new highs all in one day. So just really nice and clean, easy trade. If you were focused on it, it pretty much broke that prior day high and never really looked back the whole entire session. All right, so what was the volume on this? Let's see, about 1.8. These were the setups in 2022 that they were working so well that the stats were pretty much saying by the day 2, if it breaks the prior day high, and just close your eyes, because there was such a high percentage of them that close on the daily high on day 2 or the low. It was kind of crazy, and that it's not been quite the same since 2022, but when that was playing out, it was basically the end of 22 into 2023. You saw these setups all the time through earnings. All right, let's move along here. So some active positions. I put a S&P trade on early in the session. The idea was to catch this bounce for a potential run up into earnings that just didn't play out. So that was very small. I left half on just as a lotto. Took half off at like 50%. So just holding that. That's likely dead here as Apple's not really doing anything, and Amazon is down. Meta just holding a little bit of roll up. So really nice win on Meta. Gave some back on it, but still a really profitable ticket for the day. We'll see if this can do anything tomorrow. Not super high expectations there. Just some roll up sizing. And then Netflix getting exciting, really, testing my patience of late. But I've just kind of stuck to my guns with this one because the thesis has stayed valid. So as long as it stays, and I understand, we're running out of time. These expire. I'm in 1150s expire tomorrow. So you could argue, getting flat at certain points and just re-entering, but this is just really respected and done exactly what I have wanted it to do. Today, what was interesting is the EMA started to catch up to it finally, and we rejected perfectly at the EMAs here, so on the daily. And when you look at the hourly, this also trapped above the 3450 here. We tested it earlier in the week and rejected, and today we kind of trapped above and then accelerated into the close. So maybe a little bit of the end of the month flow happening here, but nonetheless, this is looking really good for continuation and a bigger breakdown. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. What I will say is if this doesn't make a move early in the session, I'll likely get flat and look to reposition risk into, with more time, because the thesis is still very much valid to me. We've been riding this lower for a while now. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I'll preserve some premium if, say, this gaps up a little bit or makes a first move up. It'll be fine just to get flat and then just re-enter with a little bit more time tomorrow, just respecting the theta. All right, let's see what else. ASML. ASML actually was really weak. It cracked 700 again today and closed below. So I have 670 puts as roll-ups. This was from a trade last week around here that just didn't play out. Yeah, this is still pretty darn far away from that 670 spot with 1 day to expiration. So not expecting much here, but it is very weak. The idea is played out. It's just this was, when you look at the dailies here, that is just really messy. but still really, looking pretty good here for downside. So I'll see where it's at tomorrow, see what's going on, but not expecting a whole lot. All right, some swings. So Charter's been awesome. So we took some more profit today. I put the core back on the back test of 286 yesterday. That turned out to be a great decision. That was the high, and then we had a nice move lower today into this kind of near this 264. That was an ATR. So if we go out to the weekly chart, I'll just delete these levels real quick. There's not a whole lot of support until we get down to this 252. So we're just one time framing lower here. We've got 252 below, and then we got 235 below that. This is obviously, starting to kind of capitulate. So the goal here is just to continue to keep some of a core position on as long as it respects prior day bars. So, that method starts here, the prior day bar, then moves down the trail here, then here, then here. So our trail now would be like 283.50, where if it starts to breach that, then you just kind of reassess and wait for the next setup to occur. But for now, the way that you just keep riding this lower is as long as the daily bars continue to respect, you just keep holding. You don't want to underestimate how low it can go. Just because it's down this much doesn't mean that it can't keep going. So that's the way that I like to quantify that. So we'll continue to do so. Hopefully we get a bit of a gap down tomorrow. Let's see, what else? Tesla, I have a lot of positions on right now. Tesla, more than I normally do. Tesla not really behaving how I want, but it's still above 300. I've just been looking at the weekly wedge that's set up here. If we start to break 300, I'm out. It's that simple. We'll see maybe a little bit at the end of the month action, trying to shake people out. We'll see if it can start to push higher tomorrow. Let's see. BABA. All right, so BABA, we've got a nice reaction today. Sorry, I was distracted by something. It was funny. I was joking about this yesterday. It seems like every time I try to put a swing on this, I call the top. It's kind of hilarious. Not the greatest at swing trading the Chinese stocks, which I'm not sure many people are. This is tough. But anyway, we back tested the EMAs here and got a nice bounce today. So yesterday held the 34.50. Nice reaction today. I have January calls, so plenty of time to let this try and play out. Those calls are around down 20% or so. So still holding up quite nice considering my entry was around 123. All right, let's go through some of what's going on for tomorrow. Let's take a look at earnings. So Apple, we pull up the summary here. I believe there's like a 4% implied move. I posted this earlier, just trying to find it. Yeah, 3.5, basically 4% implied move on Apple. Let's get the extended hours going here. All right, so big picture on Apple. This has just been very boring to say the least. It's respected this 215 resistance. It's one of the only Mag 7s. It might be the only Mag 7 name that's below the 200 day. So, it's been lagging quite significantly. There's just not a real compelling narrative for Apple right now. So until that changes, I don't really expect much. You saw earnings come out. It's not doing. It had an initial pop. It got rejected right by that 214.50 again, and then right back lower. So not a whole lot to say here. This doesn't excite me to trade tomorrow. Maybe a break of 207.50, but likely would just wait for something to set up intraday. It is a new month, so maybe it gets a little bit of added action around the open tomorrow, but we'll see. Nothing that is like Microsoft or Meta was, as if you were traded with us this morning, was laser focused on those grade A setup for Meta today. Honestly, Microsoft was a grade A exhaustion gap. I just didn't have the confidence to put the trade on. So, all right, let's see what else we had. Amazon. So Amazon, a bit of a muted reaction. So we might get an offsides trade tomorrow. This could be a little bit more interesting. So they had EPS 1.68. It beat the consensus. 167 billion, up 13% year over year. AWS sales about 31 billion, and their guidance for Q3 is below expectations. So stock's down about 3%. I believe about 4% or so was implied, and right now we're down to 2%. So not a big reaction. The big picture on Amazon has been a very difficult chart. We've made ground, but it's not been clean. It's kind of like Google. It's inching its way higher, catching up to the S&P, but not really, with the exception of a couple days, not really catching much follow through or clean momentum. And now we're gapping back lower. So 233 was a key level I had. We fought around that spot, back lower now. 227 is key below, which we did get a reaction here in the after hours. So kind of like Hood today, you had this, kind of muted reaction. First move down, red to green move. That's like the offsides trade. Space Monkey caught that one today. We'd be looking for something similar if the structure is like this tomorrow on Amazon. So we'll see what happens. Also not that compelling to me yet. We'll see what happens tomorrow, what the pre-market structure looks like. But for right now, it's not the most exciting thing. And that's really the case for a lot of setups going into tomorrow, to be honest. All right, Net reported. They beat. So there was about a 13% implied move on Net, and it's only up 5%. So, more kind of, I think this is pretty much just got capped by, or slapped down rather, by this previous all-time high. So previous all-time high at 221. The initial earnings reaction popped straight up to that. So, the thing that is interesting here, I would say, is with the implied move of, 13% and only moving 5%. That is interesting only because the earnings were good and it's the previous all-time high, which is obviously a very big level that is containing price. So if we get some nice pre-market structure tomorrow on this, this could play catch up to that implied move a little bit if it can break through that 221.64. So I want to watch Net tomorrow through 221.64. Just make a note of this. I'll clean this up before I send it out to the group. All right, so Net. Just add this to my watch list here. Continuation. All right, let's see what else do we have. Somebody asking about UNH. What a dog this one is, huh? I was really confident in the downside yesterday at the open, and this just played so much shake and bake. I actually went long January calls into the close yesterday because I was like, this is just acting very different and like it wants to bottom. So I rarely will switch my thesis or that quickly, and I just got all kind of run over on this one. So cut those at the open. It wasn't a big loss. It was pretty small actually, thankfully. It was like 15% or something. But this ended up playing out. This move is what I was looking for yesterday. So as is tradition sometimes with me, I'm a day early. But I was really expecting this to play out, excuse me, yesterday. And it's just mainly for the reasons that it has had a lot of trouble holding seeing follow through to the downside. If you look at like the 30-minute, every time this gets news or spikes lower, it just recovers really fast. Doesn't end up going anywhere, but it pops off of moves to the downside. Even on earnings, big move down, just got bought up really, really fast. Moved down on the open, got bought up really fast. So what was really kind of compelling to me actually going into yesterday was the fact that into the close on the earnings day, it finally started to get some momentum to the downside. So I was fully expecting, this to really wash out yesterday and catch some momentum, and it just could not get follow through, and then we get it today. So, that's trading. It's not perfect, right? But this was an awesome trade. Just I was a day early. As for what to think going forward, we broke this key 248 spot. This was the low, so this is pretty much in a capitulation mode. It's looking for a bottom, and it can't find one. So the way I think about that, is as you saw me yesterday get interested in trying to catch a bit of a swing. If you're sized properly, at some point this will likely revert back to the mean a bit. But I would not underestimate how low it can go first. So, and that's where I'm just in the headspace now. I tried along, and I know it only lasted a few hours, but I would just rather sit on hands. You have a lot of structure over here to the left that is from 2019, as low as 190 and as high as 300. So this is some pretty constructive price action on the higher time frame. I would just be looking to see if maybe we can find some kind of basing in there first. I think you can continue to follow this lower though, as it tries to capitulate. So I would rather be in a position where I caught a lot of profit on this move today, and that's just not the case, unfortunately. So really, nice move, just unfortunately couldn't catch it. Somebody calling out Reddit. I always think of a frog when I think of say Reddit. All right, so Reddit. Let's ask Perplexity what the heck was implied here. Grok and Perplexity, guys, are really helpful to quickly find the implied move or earnings or any information. Kind of hilarious as I say that. Perplexity says there's no mention of Reddit. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's see. What was implied? I can just bring this over here so you guys can see it on the stream. All right, summary from Reddit. EPS beats, revenue 500 mil beats, daily active users 110 million up. So revenue up 70% year over year. Active users up 21%. Gross margin 90%. Net income. Pretty darn good numbers. What was implied again on this? I think it was like 10% or something. Yeah. Why is this not giving me? I'll just look at Thinkorswim real quick. Hold on. Reddit. 22-point implied move. We are up 24 points, and we were higher. So this was up, as much as 32, which makes sense. Those numbers are good. So a pretty big beat on the earnings. And let's look at the daily here. Really nice move. So this is recovering. This is gaining a lot of ground now. Really, really nice. So Reddit in play tomorrow. Let's see how we think about it. The structure right now, we'll have to wait for the pre-market, but it's a bit extended. A lot of times you'll get a give and go when you get this kind of extension. That can be really good. What's interesting is this key level here at 180.74. Call it 181. If that holds and you get enough of a reset on the RSI, that could give us an opening drive, so kind of like Meta today. But if not, I would look for a give and go, which give and go, if you don't know, just expecting a move down immediately on open that finds some consolidation and a turn higher. That turn higher is the entry for a long, risking the lows. That's a playbook setup of ours. So we'll see what it looks like in the morning, but this is good. Thank you for calling it out. We have some more earnings. So Coinbase, implied move is about, I believe, 10%. If I'm not mistaken. It's down about 6.5 on the higher time frame. We're gapping into some support here. These were the previous highs before we broke out. So, we tagged and made new all-time highs recently, but these previous all-time highs around 350 are what's being tested here in the after-hour session. So, less than implied move. Sometimes you'll get that offsides play or fade higher on earnings, and when it's back testing a key level. So I'd be looking for that tomorrow. All right. Let's see. Did MSCR report finally? Are they not reporting, or am I going crazy here? Is it just not moving? Did I cover NVIDIA? Nope, I did not. Let's look at NVIDIA. ASML, I did talk about ASML, so we had a bit of a sell today across the space. NVIDIA 177.30. Let's see, after hours. Honestly, this is like, it's just been tough to find good trades, in my opinion. The trend, it's obviously been trending higher. So if you're long term or swing trading, you're happy. But I just think that this has become quite a tough trade. So what is kind of interesting is with the market breaking, if we can lose that 63.31 spot, and we're seeing some selling in semis, which oftentimes is a signal. One day is not a trend. We have to be mindful of the fact that today's month end and tomorrow's a new month, right? So with that being said, it can get a little funky, but it's never a great sign for the market when semis are starting to sell. One day is not a trend. We've got a little bit of nuance with end of month and beginning of the month, like I said, but it's something to watch tomorrow pretty closely. So I don't have a whole lot to say here. Something that piqued my interest yesterday was a potential reversion trade on AMD. Only just because it's gotten a bit extended, but that's never something you want to front run. Just because a lot of names like this that are strong will stay strong longer than you think. And I like to look at the prior daily bars as like a signal to start a reversion trade. I'm going to stay patient here, and even just as I'm talking about it, just because of the nuance of tomorrow. Let's give it a day. Let's see what happens, and go from there. I think we need a little bit more action before I have any confidence in either direction, for that matter. Let's see, FICO. What is this? I don't know what this is. Let's see. Do they have earnings or something? What's the deal with this? It's obviously moving on some news. Isn't it awesome how you can just ask a GPT prompt now or whatever? Hey, what's going on with this? And it just tells you. All right. The intraday drop. Any news? No, I don't want that. All right, I'm just gonna go to the wire here. Not getting the information as fast as I want to. FICO. All right, looks like earnings were yesterday. Some price target information. Cool. All right, so earnings basically. All right. Not something I've traded before. Daily looks honestly looks kind of broken. I would be cautious trading this. It doesn't look the most liquid, so be careful there. But it's quite bearish in terms of RSI for what it's worth. Yeah, not a whole lot to say here, but if it puts in a turn, you could try to catch a turn for scalps with shares or something. All right, let's see. Palo Alto. So this is actually a pretty good day too. It's a little more nuanced. Some of the prior day low breaks or prior day high for day two are easier. This actually was quite nice today. The RSI got super bearish in the pre-market and just dumped into yesterday's lows. So going into tomorrow, so what do we think? A bit again. I will say this like as a main takeaway for this session in our review session, it's kind of I don't like the end of the month, beginning of the month nuance. Like you kind of have to take some of the daily charts as a grain of salt around this time. It just is what it is. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But this is at a very key spot, Palo Alto. So 173, very key level. If you look left, This is a prior low, and also the high when we bounced in April. You have multi-week highs at that level, and then we finally broke above it, and that led to a push to all-time highs ultimately. So we're back testing that spot now. This is very crucial for the stock. So I'll watch this with you tomorrow. I think that's a good one to keep an eye on. All right, let's see. Let's go through. I'll get to some questions here in a second. Let's go through some of the main names just quickly. See if anything stands out. So PLTR, just grinding at the highs. Amazon we talked about. Tesla we talked about. Nvidia we talked about. Meta. So Meta day 2 technically tomorrow, right? So not. I'm kind of bummed about Meta. Just it was set up so nicely for a run to 800, just didn't happen. When it closes in the middle of its range like this, it's kind of indecisive. Often you'll see a couple different things play out. So it will depend on the data in the morning. We've got some data. What is it? Non-farm and unemployment rate tomorrow, and PMI data. So we can get a move for sure. But where this is currently at, the confidence for either direction is lower when this is the case. If you close up at the highs, something like that, that usually sets up a much stronger trade. That being said, a couple different trades to watch would be if we were to maybe open a little bit lower, and let me get rid of this magnet. If we open lower but end up kind of why does this keep snapping to that? If we were to break today's lows but quickly recover, that could be a day 2 failed breakdown that we've seen play out really well for a scalp back into the middle of the range. A break of the previous day high is something to consider, but only if the market's really strong, because the entry at those highs would be harder because it would have made a bigger move already into it. So we just have to. It's a little bit more nuanced. You'd have to see how it's set up into that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then there's the fade. So the fade a little bit trickier, but if the market's aligned, it could be good. So if sell into this, maybe sell and then kind of retest and then turn. I don't know what is going on with this arrow. It's usually not this funky. I turned the magnet off. I don't know what's going on. It doesn't like me much right now. But yeah, if we were to break the lows and then end up retesting and failing, something like that, like a break, retest and turn, that kind of a turn could be an aggressive short if paired with the market, ideally, right? Like if the market cracks 63.31 or is just down on PCE and below it, and you see some kind of action like this, that could be a really nice fade, because you would then be targeting the previous all-time high on Meta, which risk reward here would be really good. It's 747, I believe. Yeah, around that. All right, so that's Meta. All right. Next, Goldman Sachs. Not a whole lot to say there. It's just at the highs. Apple, boring. Microsoft is day 2, so we close on the lows. A good example of closing in the bottom 20% of the day's range. You could, if the market's positive, look for failed breakdown here, 531.90. But you also would want to consider just continuation. So a continuation trade with tight stops below today's low for the downside. Just looking for continuation of the exhaustion gap. AMD, it's checking back to 174. That's bullish if it holds. We have 187 above, and then 200 starts to become a magnet. So something to continue. Thanks for tuning in, Ivan. Have a good night. Just saw your message. Google, pretty lackluster. Nothing honestly too interesting here to me. Maybe a fade. Netflix, we already talked about, but I'd love to talk about it again because it just looks awesome. Really love the action into the close. I don't want to get ahead of myself because of that end of the month, beginning of the month action. So it can get kind of weird. But if we get follow through tomorrow, this could be really, really good. Especially if we gap below it. So if we get a gap into the middle, 1140, 1145, I'd be looking to take profits on my current position and then look for something like, if it will let me draw, push back up that rejects and turns lower for puts, longer dated puts, ultimately targeting a correction until 1100. And the thesis, if you missed Netflix over the last week or so, is pretty simple. The stock has been kind of a hideout. It's been, incredibly strong since April lows. It's up 63%, right? So a move from the highs of, even correcting 15 to 20% is still considered pretty healthy, right? Well, that puts the stock down under 1100. 20% would be 1080. 1100, about 18%, 15%, about 1130. So just some rough guide. The stock would still be up, quite a lot, over 30% on the year, right? Roughly, with that kind of a pullback. So it's not like I'm, just a mega bear or something on Netflix. I'm just trading the current downtrend. At some point, it'll likely find some support and become a great long. But until then, I'm just gonna trade it lower. All right, just being mindful of everyone's time here, going a bit long. That's pretty much it for the what's it called? Going into tomorrow. So to summarize, let's get a list going for tomorrow. So for day one trades, coin 350 back test and turn will be interesting. Reddit, opening drive, or give and go. Nets, this would be an opening drive through that spot. That one's pretty interesting because I think it's being contained by those highs, but the earnings were really good. It just so happens to be right at all-time highs. The market may have other plans if we just sell off tomorrow, but something to watch closely. All right, I'll get to some questions here in just a sec. Just want to get this list kind of carved out here. All right, what did we say for continuation? What did LMT do? Okay, so we're just really determined to defend 420. I'm just going to leave that be for now. Palo Alto over, let's just say 183 we'll watch. Starbucks, STX, not interested in these anymore. BE could be interesting. Let's take a look at BE, Bloom Energy. All right, a little bit of a trap at 38. Nice, really nice continuation this week. We've got 40 above. All right, so 40, 42 above. So it's just worth watching. This is technical. We'll just keep it on our watch. Tesla, I'm going to remove. Netflix. So Netflix under today's low would be what? 1158-ish. 1157.74. Alright, so that's definitely high on the radar. Really hoping we gap down on Netflix would make life easier. Kartik. Love the GIF. Okay. We'll keep UNH on watch, as annoyed as I am with that and missing the trade that I was fully ready for max size on yesterday. It just didn't play out. We got Meta day 2 continuation. So this one's interesting. So let's filled breakdown, or yeah, we'll just watch filled breakdown. We'll see where it's at in the morning. And then Microsoft under prior day low, which is, what is today's low? So normally I'd have most of this prepped and just record it after, but you guys are seeing me do it sort of live here, so thanks for being patient. All right, cool. Let's get a couple questions done here. ARM is actually a continuation, so Kartik asking about ARM. This is a nice continuation trade. So we've got this key level present on the stock here on the daily at 141. This is kind of a disappointing one. I thought that earnings maybe would give this some life and make it interesting. Back through 168 could have been really fun. Not the case. Pretty weak today after earnings. Tomorrow's a pretty textbook day 2. So watch this 141 low. I'm sorry, 140.70. And reminder, semis are a bit weak. So, one day is not a trend, but if we start to break down tomorrow, this could be really good. ASML under 700. Let me add that. It's really 694, but as long as it holds under 700. A-Lab. Yeah, strong chart on A-Lab. Not a great close. Closed about in the middle of its daily range. Watch 135.70. If that can hold, this high at 147.36 can be a magnet, but a bit of a gap. Maybe you get a gap fill first or something. This one a little bit tougher. This was called out, I believe, by Space Monkey earlier in the week. I think he brought it to my attention. Maybe somebody in the room did, but ended up playing out really nicely as a swing. All right, somebody asking, they're new here. Nice to meet you. I wanted to ask about, besides the introductory material from WAP, what else could I read, listen to in order to increase my confidence in the options plays and SPX trades? Great question. It's a bit to unpack because there's other questions that I would have, but depending on like how new you are and all of that, the number one thing I would stress is to take your time. Trading is a very challenging but rewarding skill to learn in business. So take your time going through all the playbooks and educational material. Ask a lot of questions. So outside of taking your time and not forcing things, make sure if you're putting any risk on, it's very light until things make sense to you. Ask a lot of questions. That would be the second most important thing I would say. Don't be shy. Feel free to DM me or Space Monkey or anyone in the group, or ask questions in the chat. I might, we're a bit busy, but I always respond to DMs. There's never a DM I don't respond to. So if you have questions, more than happy to help. That's why we're here. So that's what I would say. There's an introductory course in the WAP, so make sure you go through that. And then, yeah, I would say that's what I would have to say about that. Conviction or confidence comes from experience. There's no substitute for putting in the work and getting experience in what you're doing, right? So like Meta today is a great example. You saw me I sized up max size and graded the trade A off this rip off the open. So you look at the 2 minute. I pretty much entered right on this turn, right here, right? So like this entry isn't random to me, right? Like the only reason I had confidence to go max size, grade A, on Meta is because I've seen this before, right? So they're putting in the work and getting, your pattern recognition up and getting reps. It's like going to the gym, right? Like you can't go to the gym one time and expect to be strong. You've got to show up every day. So there's no substitute for that, regardless of what anybody tells you. So, this is something I would encourage you to do is go into the, like the playbook trade database after you read the, material and get familiar with everything. Just go through this Excel and open up these charts. I categorize every setup and quantify what it's called, so that I give a name to every trade I take. It's just semantics, but it's a way of staying organized. Go through here and just look. There's tons of examples of good trades, and when you just rifle through charts like that, it will help increase your pattern recognition. And then, yeah, ask a lot of questions. Really, really good question to ask. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see, what else? We'll wrap up here soon. CVNA, what do we got? I know they had earnings. Really nice opening drive, actually. A nice check back and turn. End up fading throughout the session, but opening drive was really good. All right, so we've got all-time highs here. Let me go out to the weekly real quick just to make sure. Yeah, big breakout at all-time highs. Nice. I gave up a lot of the move, which isn't usually great for day 2. What you could look for, though, is this previous all-time high. If you take out the prior day low and maybe test that and turn. That could be a nice trade. Let's see if that sets up. If it starts to fade into the gap, then you could look for short setups intraday, targeting this local high, previous local high at 363.58, and then potential gap fill. That kind of a scenario would likely only play out if the market starts to fall apart, but it's possible. So the cool thing with earnings seasons, guys, is you don't have to know what the heck what direction you're going to go in. There's so much movement and so many things that happen. You just be prepared for what happened. Like the stock, having good stock selection during this time is much easier because there's so much moving, right? Like you don't want to trade PLTR today. Why would you trade PLTR when Microsoft Meta is doing what it's doing, or Carvana is doing what it's doing, or even ALAB or whatever else? You know, like there's if you're an active trader, you know, specifically, there's so much moving that even if you miss the first move, like on Meta, you miss this opening drive, you're like, oh my God, how'd you catch that? It was too fast. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I've taken this trade probably 500 times. So if you miss that, well, look, it set up another trade intraday. This is a very easy scalp. You know, it ended up not doing much after that, but it still is profitable, right? So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Somebody asked about P. Is that PI or PL? I can't read. I have a hard time reading. I just do math. All right, so I'm kidding. Really big gap on earnings. Nice. It's Chinese stock, right? Semiconductor, isn't it? Is it? Am I crazy or is this not? This is in the Chinese space, right? I think so. Anyway, this is a day 2 tomorrow, so nice eye on that. The higher time frame, some of these names can be a little less liquid, so it's just a word of caution. I like to trade these types of names with shares. I find it easier. But yeah, pretty straightforward here. This continuation setup. It closed in the not in the upper percentage of its daily range. I like to see them close in the upper 20%. This is just shy of that, so not ideal. You'd want to see it close up in here for a stronger day 2, but it's not bad. It's like in the upper 35% of its range or so. So it's not terrible. Market was also weak into the close. So what you'd want to see, let's look at some more stuff here. So RVOL is very good. That's a positive sign. All right, so check out the RSI. And you look at the 30-minute. This RSI is getting pretty bullish when compared to the pre-market dip. So this dip here is at 150, call it 154, and it's more oversold than it was pre-market at 146. So going into tomorrow, this, if you still, regardless, RSI is just an indicator, and it's something that is a piece of information that is useless without price giving you a direction. So when you have a divergence like that, what you want is price to lead. So if price starts pushing higher and we start breaking these highs, then you can start to try and catch that turn, risking that pivot low. So how I would trade this would be tomorrow, let's assume it's holding up like this, and we see a first move up. I would be looking to take that move higher, risking this pivot low because there's energy. So you want price to lead first because the RSI is showing that there's plenty of energy. You just need price to go. So that's a good day 2 to keep on watch. I'll add it to my list just to watch it with you. And who knows, maybe I'll trade it. All right, any other questions? I'm going to wrap up here. Been going about an hour. A little longer than I normally take to do the recap, but happy to answer some questions and do it live. It is recorded, yeah. So there will be a recording posted. Believe it or not, I've finally gotten a habit of doing that. I see somebody typing, so just giving a second here. Make sure get everyone's questions before we head out. What are the cloud EMA numbers? So check out the education channel. I just posted a video of that. I can tell you quickly just while I'm here. I use the Ripster EMA clouds. I use the 921-3450. That's it. And one just small tip is make sure, at least from how I use them, just look at the RTH session. I don't look at the EMAs with the extended hours on. I only look at them with them off. So, but they're in the education channel. There's a video on it. All right, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your evening. Pretty solid day overall. Just quick review. I had a good day, but I definitely did give back a little bit. Not too much to be concerning, but it was like one of those days where you're very close to like a very big day, and just didn't quite play out. But it still was a good day, so I'll take it. It's been a very active week. I don't love being this active, to be honest, but I do love earnings season because there's a lot of opportunity. The thing you have to keep in check is your mental fatigue. So just remember, like what we talked about in the workshop, decision fatigue is, in my opinion, like a fat tail risk in trading. You can make 100 or 99 decisions correct, and then one bad decision just ruins all of your progress. So that's the reality of trading, and that often happens when you're mentally just not quite there, or you're just tired and you make a one bad decision. So it's a good time when it's busy to take a step back, maybe this evening or something, and reflect and recharge before tomorrow, and make sure you're honoring your systems. If you go into the day and you have a risk limit, honor it. There's always going to be another setup. We've got a lot of trading left in the year, so don't feel FOMO or force any kind of trade if at all possible, and protect your profits into the end of the week. So I'll leave you